welcome to the BSB Bookathon Winter Edition. This is your first panel of the thing, and it's going to be so good that you're going to be like, how could they possibly top that? And the answer is they won't be able to. So this is the Payoff Writing I Love You, or as we like to call it, the climax, but we weren't allowed to call it that officially. I'm going to introduce your authors to you, and then I will be grilling them with questions about algebra. So first off, Maggie Cummings. Maggie is the author of 7 books. She hails from Staten Island, New York. Love that word, hails, where she lives with her wife and their 2 children. These days, she spends the bulk of her time binge watching shows while procrastinating writing. Don't we all? To pay the bills, she works as a police captain in Brooklyn, commanding a squad of detectives. Oh my God, which sounds way more exciting than it is. Oh, never mind.
That's true.
She is a complete sucker for indulgent TV, kettle-cooked potato chips, and pedestrian chocolate. Is that chocolate that walks about?
Yes, of course.
Next, we have the lovely Nancy Wheelton. Nancy graduated over 20 years ago from the Ontario Veterinary College in unpronounceable Ontario. Guelph? Guelph?
Guelph.
Guelph?
Yeah, Guelph. Yep. Well done.
Thank you. She spent the first few years after graduation working in a mixed animal practice, so boys and girls, in a small town in the province of Saskatchewan. Then she settled in the Great Lakes region of Ontario, where she is a practicing veterinarian. When Nancy's not kayaking, photographing wildlife, or working on her beach house, she enjoys the crashing waves and sunsets while riding. That'd be very nice with some pedestrian chocolate. And Joy Argento hails again from Rochester, New York. Hails. Creativity has been her way of life since she was a small child. The first time she picked up a pencil and drew a picture, she knew she found her passion. Oh, that's cool. It wasn't until many years later that her passion for writing was born. 2 passions. Inspired by her favorite lesbian writers, Georgia Beers, who we've never heard of, at the top of that list. She tried her hand at writing and fell in love. Aw. These days, she splits her time between art, writing, and being a caregiver for the elderly. Very important. And last but certainly not least, Georgia Beers is an award-winning author of nearly 30 lesbian romance novels. She resides in upstate New York with lots of bears. With her pets, a wide variety of plants, and at least the desire to learn how to cook. Oh, you know, we've all got that, but who cares? When not writing, she searches Netflix for a good scary movie, explores the world of wine and cocktails, and dutifully participates in spin class. Blech. She is currently hard at work on her next book. You can visit her and find out more at georgiabeers.com. Yeah, where you will find her nearly, what do you write, 2 books a month now? 3, 4?
I wish. No.
Okay, so let's kick off. Now, in romance novels, the I love you is payoff, usually because it comes toward the end of the book. Because the culmination of a romance is saying, I has feelings for you, do you has feelings for me? And since you as authors know that it's coming, in a sense, you're always working backward. So I would like you to tell us what your process for building a romance is when you've already got the end filled in. And who am I going to pick out first? I promised it wouldn't be Joy. So it's going to be Maggie Cummings.
Okay. You know, I hadn't really thought about it like the I love you or the payoff as being sort of already there until you kind of put out the questions in the email. And then I was like, oh, that's so true. And I hadn't like ever really thought about it in that format before. But for me, kind of knowing it's there, and I do, it serves as kind of like a goalpost to work back from. And I like that because it gives me some time to kind of set up beats that I want to hit along the way, because I sort of always know what the big moments are going to be. I know where the first kiss is. I know where the first time they have sex, and I know where the first I love you is. And so it kind of gives me, like, it's usually for me probably about, I mean, it varies where it goes, whether it's 50% through the book or 70% or 30%, but it gives me that sort of that big moment that I know I've got to work up to and make sure I hit all the beats along the way. So kind of as a guideline. And I like that about it. So I think I inadvertently have always kind of structured my thought process around that moment without even really knowing it.
Yeah, that's cool. Sort of just fell into it there. That's awesome.
Thank you for helping me understand what I've been doing.
That's what I'm here for. That's why they pay me the big bucks. How about you, Nancy?
Well, I sort of start 2/3 through the book, sort of at that dark moment where the conflict comes together and you think they're done and nothing's ever going to happen. And then I work back from that to the beginning to kind of, lay down the breadcrumbs and build the conflict. And but from the dark moment to the I love you at the end, that just sort of happens. And sometimes how quickly I get there and how I get there is kind of a surprise for even me. So it makes it a little bit fun.
I think that all writers have that moment, and then people ask you, like, how do you write this? And you're like, oh, it just sort of happens. Just try your best. Okay, Joy, how about you?
I totally fly by the seat of my pants. I don't have very much planned out at all, and I learn who the characters are as I write them. Occasionally I have a scene come to me and I jump ahead in the book and then go back to where I left off. I have to fight myself to not put the I love you in too soon, because the characters start to feel it and I start to feel it, and I want everybody to know. So I have to fight myself to wait.
How about you, Georgia?
I think I agree a little bit with Nancy that it changes every time, but I also agree with Maggie that, and what you said is that that's the goal. I mean, that is the goal of a romance. That is what the reader is along for the ride for. They're in my back seat so that I will take them to that I love you. So I think I don't consciously work backwards from that, but like Maggie says, that's exactly what I'm doing. I know that that's where I have to get, but it's about the journey. And so it's different every time. And I know that Maggie called it a goalpost. I know that it's down there. I know that's what I'm shooting for, and I'm going to get there eventually. But I'm going to take a bunch of swerves and curves, and I'm the opposite of Joy. I sometimes leave it until way too late before they say that. And I think that I had one book where one person didn't say it back. Like in my head, she meant it and she felt it, but she didn't say it. And my editor was like, hang on. No, we're not done yet.
No, she's playing this whole time.
Exactly. And I was like, oh, I forgot. So yeah, it's about the journey, but that is the payoff. And you have to keep that in mind. That's why a reader picks up a romance.
And not for one person to say, I love you, and the other one to go, oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, kind of building on that, which you said, Georgia, and what Joy said as well, when you're really when you're enjoying writing a book, are you tempted to draw out the final I love you, or the reverse where it's frustrated you to the point where you want to just get there quicker? Or is writing the final payoff always kind of bittersweet? I think, and I'm not talking about like, do you want to write it because you don't really want to hurt your characters, so you just want to be like, meet, love, oh, and we're done. We're out in a tight 15,000 words.
Yeah.
So let me hear about writing it too early, writing it too late, or if it's bittersweet. And I'm going to pick on you first, Nancy.
Well, I put the love yous when they tell each other. That comes quite close to the end. Even the last chapter, that reunion and reconciliation. Thinking that, when they have their private thoughts that they might love the other person, that can happen a little sooner, but they keep it to themselves. I don't know about bittersweet. I think it's just, sweet when it gets to the end, and I'm happy when that happens and they've managed to overcome their baggage and their nonsense and be where they're supposed to be. So
I completely agree. What's your take on it, Joy?
I don't find it bittersweet. I love that part. That's, even though it's not consciously what I'm aiming for, I know it's there and I know it's coming. And it's almost a relief to me when they say it.
That you're like, thank God I'm done with this freaking book, or
no, that they get their happily ever after. That's what I'm aiming for. And I don't like to put them through all the trials and tribulations. I know I have to, but yeah, when they finally get to that point, it's almost like I could breathe.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. How about you, Georgia?
Love it. And I'm always really happy when I find the right way to get there. And I don't know how to verbalize this. I'm a writer, you know. When you figure out a scene, or when you figure out a line that you've wanted someone to say and exactly the right place to put it, there's something about that that is just like cause for celebration. So if I find the absolute perfect place to put the I love you, there's like dancing here all over, up and down the stairs. And it happens pretty often, but there have been times when I'm worried that, like, I don't want it to look like I shoehorned it in because I'm supposed to. But sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's hard, and you have to keep fudging and messing with stuff until you get it to feel exactly right. And then when it does, the pom-poms come out, and you know, there's a party and there's cheerleading, and
Thank God I'm done with this freaking book.
stripper pole.
Yes.
Exciting.
Yes. Maggie.
You know, it's so interesting what you say, Georgia, there, in that, you know, that it's hard to not make it sound shoehorned in, because I think as writers, you know, we come up with different ways to say different things, but you always have to say, I love you. It has to be those words. It can't be anything like, we can do all the things, you know, in the journey of the story of showing the person, the two characters, that they love each other, but the words actually have to be said, and there is no way to substitute anything else for it. So I think it can feel kind of like, well, didn't I just do this the same way in the last book, or even in this book when they said it to each other before? Because I feel like my characters, I don't know, they say I love you a lot, and sometimes too soon, which can be like a problem, or I've been told it's sort of like anticlimactic then, because then you have to sort of bring them back from it and things like that. But, you know, I think it's this whole thing of like, how do I keep it different? How do I make it new? To sort of go back to the original question, like, have I ever wanted to extend the book? I mean, I find writing so hard and so difficult. I'm always just so happy when it's over. It does not come easy for me. And I'm always like, wow, I can't believe that I actually made it through another one. And then I do it again and again. So I don't know what that's about, but so like, I've never tried to draw it out, but I think on the flip side, I sometimes say it too early, not to like get it over with really, but just because sometimes it feels like it can happen then, but then you have to do a whole other slew of other things to sort of, to make it worth the reader's while to go along for the journey. You're asking people to spend their money on these different stories, and you want it to be like a real, full, complete story.
That's why I don't think I'm creative enough to write just a contemporary romance novel, because I would have to, even if there were I love yous, it'd have to be like, and then one of them gets kidnapped or something, and that would be the thing that rounds out the book. I do not think I mentioned this, but he just reminded me about it in the chat. But I'm going to tell you about the sale real quick. We are running a 15% off sale until Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on various ebook titles by the participating authors, and we will post the links to the sale in the chat roll, and I think Sandy just did that. I was just so excited to get into this panel. Okay, so, and also, if I forget one of you while I'm asking a question, please be like, hello, you forgot me. It's not personal. I blame my medication, but it's really just me. Okay, next question. Somebody already mentioned this in the chat roll too, so you people are really on the ball. We know that the ending of a book must be earned through character arcs, through plots, through all of this stuff. It has to feel like we've gotten to I love you organically. So are there points that you as a writer have to hit before your characters will be ready to say those three little words? So maybe you think there always has to be a fight, or there always has to be a dark night of the soul, or there always has to be something that separates them. What is it that you really like to put into your books so that I love you feels like they have earned it? And you laugh, so I'm going to pick on you, Georgia, because you're like, oh my God.
Well, I love it because it's, you know, it's the dark moment, but you put in our email that it was the dark moment of the soul. And so,
it's the dark night of the soul. That's what it's called.
Fine, that's what I'm going to call it. The dark night of the soul. Yeah, there's got to be a little of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a whole huge, I mean, I'm learning, and I actually put something on Twitter a few weeks ago just to gauge what other people were thinking about level of angst given the past year. I was writing and I realized that the book I was writing didn't have a ton of angst. There was a little bit of roundabout miscommunication and stuff like that, but there wasn't any dark night of the soul. There was some hesitation, there was some uncertainty, but there wasn't a huge amount of angst, and I was a little worried about that. And it worked well. I mean, it moved smoothly, and I thought it worked well, but when you've done this as long as I have, you kind of worry a little bit when you don't have, you know, I didn't rip them apart. They kind of went, yeah, I don't know. You know, instead of the crashing, tearing, rending of clothing. So I don't think that there has to be the dark night of the soul, but there has to be something that jeopardizes the relationship. If you look at a TV show and you have a happy couple, and the happy couple always goes through bumps, because a happy couple for too long is boring. And people read romance to go on that journey, and that journey has bumps and roadblocks and obstacles and things to go around and things to go through and things that stop them in their tracks. And you have to have those things in order to keep your reader's attention. So I like to have some kind of a dark moment of some sort. Doesn't have to be huge. I also like to have lots of flirting, and also like internal looking inside. I'm blanking on the right phrase, but soul searching, that kind of thing. Yeah. There's usually a character that has to reevaluate her beliefs or her past, or you know what she thinks should happen. So those things are important to me, but I don't think it has to be agonizing. I think it's agonizing, but I don't think it has to be.
I think it has to, a lot of that has to depend on the tone too. I mean, if you have a really angsty book about people who've survived some serious stuff, you know, the Dark Knight's going to be a lot darker than if you're writing sort of a comedic romance.
Exactly.
You might still have a dark moment, but it's going to be just sort of gray.
Yes. And someone in the chat bar earlier on said something about, doesn't the trope that you're writing to sort of direct how the path goes? And that's absolutely true. If you've got enemies to lovers, if you've got people on like opposite sides of the law or opposite sides of some huge argument, they have to get past that. So there probably is going to be some kind of huge angst. You know, the Ice Queen, she's got to look inside, and somebody's got to discover that she actually has a really warm heart. So your trope does inform that a little bit. Definitely. That was actually a really good point that person made. I don't remember who it was. I'm sorry.
Really warm heart and really warm pants. What about you, Maggie? What do you feel like you have to put in there?
I mean, I agree. I think there has to be a dark moment, but kind of to sort of echo some of what you both are saying, I think it depends on who the characters are, how sort of dark that moment gets and how big it is. And sometimes it's just more of like a, kind of like George was saying, like a, rather than a big ripping apart moment. But I think as long as it's true to the characters, sort of that's what's important. I think that there are people that just tend to have like sort of like bigger personalities than others. So they might tend to have a bigger dark moment or a deeper dark moment than somebody else would. But I think we do want to have these characters sort of go through something together, to know that they can get through something together, to know that, like, if it's all kind of flat and even, then as the reader, how do we know that when they get in their first fight, it's not just over? You know, we need to see them get through that. So that's sort of what I always want to see, is some kind of conflict that they have to get past together. I also want them to kind of each experience personal growth, so that it's just to see the impact this other person has had on them that has made them be the person they are now. And that is why these two people are the only two people that are 100% right for each other, and why they are OTP or forever or whatever it is. And so that's sort of like what I want to get to, is showing that main character one is meant for main character two, and these are all the reasons why. And some of the little things I want to show along the way is, you know, that the first main character's been listening to the things that interest the second main character, something that, like they said, just kind of in passing, that matters. So I like to bring in sort of like, kind of like little moments like that.
So it has to be something that can maybe split them up for something a little while, something that they have to overcome, but not something as simple as like they don't like the same kinds of chips or something, because then it's like, well, you're not going to make it if that can break you up.
Look, I think we said this before in the intro. If it's not kettle cooked, I mean, I'm still going to eat them. I'm just not going to like them as much.
Okay, well, that's good, because then you could make, compromises for your partner. It's like, I'll eat your damn chips, but I'll pull a lot of faces.
But then what happens if somebody with kettle cook comes along? I don't know.
Oh my God! Now you're writing a whole book here. I mean, now just write this down. The artisanal chip makers. I would read it. Okay, Nancy.
Sure. So what the characters have to have before they reach the end, I'm gonna struggle to find something to say that Maggie and Georgia haven't said already, but definitely, we're all in agreement on the dark moment. Other things I like my characters to have some fun. I want them to find some common interests or build some common interests, and to have fun and to click and to be friends first. To get to the end, sure, yeah, absolutely, they need to have some growth, and I find mine, need to compromise a little bit. We're talking about the bag of chips. Everybody can have their own bag of chips. You each have your own. Probably I don't share mine anyway, so everybody needs to have their own bag of chips. But at the same time, there's other bigger things they need to compromise on or to come around to, and I think that's huge too, along with the growth and finding clarity on where they are in life and why they're doing what they're doing, because it's a personal journey as well as a romantic journey. So as long as they get there in the end.
It's very good. It's very insightful. All right, bring us home, Joy.
I'm working on my 6th book, and my books have kind of run the gamut from having, one of my books is sort of gray and not black, where the character's just not willing to face some of her past and who she is, and that's kind of what keeps them from announcing that they care about each other. All the way to a life-threatening illness in another book where one of the characters is sure she's going to die and she's keeping the other one at arm's length because she doesn't want to put her through it. They've run some from really mild to really serious. Mm-hmm. The one I'm working on now, the thing that keeps them apart is something that happened 20 years ago, where it was more than a misunderstanding. It was definitely one character thinks one thing and another one thinks another, and it literally kept them apart for 20 years. So I run the gamut. I don't have any pattern or anything that I definitely have to have in there to keep them apart. It depends on the characters, like Maggie said.
It just sort of evolves for you, like you were flying by the seat of your pants.
I definitely fly by the seat of my pants. I have some stuff I worked out in my head that has to happen, but yeah, I fly by the seat of my pants.
Yeah,
they surprise me. I don't plan on things, and they go in their own directions. They say things I don't plan on them saying, and yeah, they take over.
Don't question it. Just hold on to the ride, man.
Yeah, I'm holding on. I'm going to see a doctor about it. See if I can get some help.
If I can drag him out of me, by hook or by crook. I want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. If you just put them in the chat roll, I could miss them, because like everyone else, I'm paying attention, right? Paying attention to the people that I'm actually talking to. So please feel free to use the Q&A, especially because if I run out of questions, we're just going to be staring at each other or at George's cat.
Somebody in the chat roll wanted to see his face, so he is.
Oh, cutie. Yeah, mine would freak out if I tried to pick her up and show her to you, right? Okay, so let's talk about writing multiple books. I know many of you have at least written multiple books. I don't know if you have multiple books out or not. If you've written multiple books, how do you make sure the final I love you is always special? Which plots and arcs do your readers seem to prefer of the books that you've shown them? So who are we going to start with? Let's start with Maggie.
I don't know the answer to how you make sure it's special each time. I think it just is. And maybe I just feel that way. I mean, I want to say that I feel that way about my own books, but I also feel that way about books I've read by other authors, like multiple books by other authors. I always kind of feel that it's different. And I think some of it is, well, a lot of it is the way it's written. But also I think we all kind of bring whatever we're going through at the moment we're reading to the story. And I think that that's just inevitable. So if you pick up a romance, which I think a lot of us do to sort of escape a little bit, particularly in this past year, which has been sort of like overflowing with just everything, you know, we want to escape and we want to be connected to the characters. And that's what makes it special, is that we're sort of looking for a love story and we find it. And I don't ever read a book by an author that I've read before and be like, oh, that was just like the other one, because I think a lot of it is because of what I'm going through. Like I superimpose things that have happened to me in my life into what I'm reading, like, and that's the connection that you have with characters. So it feels special because it's unique to the characters that I'm reading. And that's because of like my own experiences. I mean, I can only hope that people feel that way when they read my books, that they're not like, oh my God, this is the exact same thing over and over again. But I think that that is something we probably all struggle with. I know I struggle with when I'm sort of crafting different stories, like, God, does this sound exactly like the other thing that I just wrote? Because it feels like it does to me. But then sort of, that's something I go through when I'm in the planning phase. When I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm just taking this character that I already wrote and putting a different name on her. And like maybe her hair is like a little bit shorter, but that's really it. So I wonder.
That's fine.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what people are experiencing. I haven't got that feedback, maybe just because those people haven't bothered to write that to me, which is great. I don't want to hear.
Please don't.
But I'm hoping that what's really happening is that people are connecting in their own ways and bringing their own journey to it, and that's what makes it special for them.
Okay.
I totally agree with Maggie in two parts of that. One, I don't know how to keep it special. It just happens. I mean, that's your goal when you go in, is to make sure that this doesn't sound like every other book you've written, and hopefully it doesn't. But I do the same thing. I'm like, did I just write this? Did I put this in another book? Did I already use this plot point? Have I written this exact character 100 times? I do the same thing. And the further along you go, the more books you write, the more that's a worry. I too have not heard people tell me that, which doesn't mean it's not true, but they've been kind enough to not berate me about it. But yeah, it's a concern. And I honestly don't know. I've been in many panels where this is a question. How do you keep it fresh? I have no idea. You just kind of try.
Once you have thousands of books under your belt like you do, you're bound to repeat yourself occasionally. I mean, we could go with the Maggie Cummings shorter hair thing, but you would have to start with somebody with like Rapunzel link there and just keep chopping little bits off as you go. What about you, Joy?
I haven't written that many books, so I'm not running into that problem. I occasionally have to go into my older books and make sure I didn't use a line of dialogue that I find is witty, because it's like, did that character say that in another book? So the characters are all different. So far I've been lucky, I think, where I've got characters that are very different because their lives have been very different. So I haven't run into that problem too much other than with the dialogue.
Well, I think I think everybody's done that a time or two. You have a bit of dialogue or a bit of description or something that just kind of gets stuck in there. And then later in another book, you're like, hey, that sounds good. You don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And
so that worries me that I don't ever want to repeat stuff like that.
Yeah, I think you probably will if you keep writing books, but hopefully just no one will notice. And if anyone does, you can just give them a dirty look.
I'll practice.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's great. How about you, Nancy?
Well, my second book just came out, so I'm only working from 2. But I think every sort of I love you and coming together at the end is special because it's a different couple. You know, every loving relationship gets there in its own path, and you know, even if they're I love you, at the end it's special because they're special. So. No, I don't have any any information that I'm sort of reusing the same ending, but only 2 books. I rely heavily on other authors with bold strokes books and my editor, to make sure that I'm putting together what pleases people most. And I guess I've read a ton of George's books, as we all have, and I feel like every ending's fresh because it's new people, and it's always fun when they get there. So I don't think you have to worry about that. There's my fangirl plug. Sorry.
Appreciate that.
That's okay. She's finishing another one probably while we speak. Okay, so let's take a question about sex. What are your feelings about characters having sex before the payoff? That's before the I love yous at the end, not before, both as a writer and as a reader. I would like to know your feelings on that. And in your writing, if your characters do have sex before they say, I love you, do they at least have to have for you some feelings for each other? Or have you ever written your main characters just having casual sex before any sort of feelings or anything get in the way? And Joy, do you want to go first on the sex question?
Sure. Where's sex again? Can you remind me? Just kidding.
I get out my dictionary.
The only book that I almost put a sex scene in, I was not going to make it, it was going to just be skimmed over. I have in Before Now, the characters meet with the idea that they're meeting for a hookup. A mutual friend has set them up for a hookup. And I was going to have them have sex, but not get into any detail. And it was actually Georgia who told me not to do that, to have them wait until they have more feelings. I never, other than that part, I've never had characters have sex before they have feelings for each other. But because the I love you is so far back in the book, other than my last book, No Regrets, where they do say I love you much earlier because there's a life-threatening situation, and it's important for the one character to say it to the other one that has the illness. Other than that, they have sex once they have feelings and they know each other's feelings, but they definitely have not said I love you yet.
Well, Georgia, since you gave her that advice, I'm guessing you are not a big fan of the casual sex before feelings.
Well,
in the characters, not in your own life. I'm not going to cry, but.
Here's the thing. I think it's okay to have your characters have sex early, but it has to be different than the sex they have once there's feelings. It has to be obviously different to the reader. There's nothing wrong with casual sex, and people, there's a million differing opinions out there, and everybody's got one. But for me, it does feel strange to write one of my main characters with somebody else before they meet the person. And I think, like I said, I think if they meet the person and they have some casual sex, I think that that's fine, but it can't be better than the sex they have after the feelings. You have to be careful of that. Way back when I wrote Too Close to Touch, you got your love interest, you've got Kylie and Gretchen, they're the love interest, and then you have a secondary character named Mick who has a thing for Kylie, and they almost get it on for a short period of time in a scene, and I was told to make sure that scene was not hotter than once Kylie and Gretchen get together. And I ended up shifting it a little bit and changing the dynamic of it. And I think it worked, but you can't have anything outshine the hotness, or even the heartfelt feelings of your main characters. So I do think it's okay to hook them up ahead of time, but I think it has to be less hot and much different than when you hook them up after the feelings. It doesn't have to be after the I love you, though I do think if you have them have sex after they say I love you, that has to be different as well. That has to be
even hotter.
Well, and emotional and slower usually. And I mean, it's got to be, that's part of the payoff as well. If the I love you comes and then there's sex, they go together. So you have to write it that way. I think that's my 2 cents. My cheeks are getting really red. I'm sorry.
It's the sex.
Might be.
It's inflaming everyone.
Sure, it's not the wine.
Yeah. Nancy, what about you?
Oh, great. I'm just writing down what George is.
Seriously, I'm taking notes over here too.
Absolutely. I don't put casual sex in the books. The sex comes when there's feelings, but it always comes before the I love yous, because the sex comes earlier than the end of the book. That said, one of the characters, it's kind of fun to play with, because I make one of the characters a little more ready a little sooner than the other one is. So she gets to feel kind of tortured waiting for the other one to catch up. So one of them's ready for sex sooner. The book that's with the editor right now, one of the characters, she's a big proponent of casual sex. She's too busy with her career to worry about all this emotional stuff. And she's ready to go page 1. So yes, that's a little bit tricky, because I have to make her wait till the other woman's ready. And then it's kind of fun because, as she gets to know the other woman, she kind of doesn't want casual sex anymore. She sees it's just, it's just like an empty bag of chips to her, right? She's gonna wait, and she's gonna wait for something real. So
Yes,
yeah,
none of us
that's the
have ever
approach to it.
been
It's
there.
kind of fun to have, one person kind of more ready sooner, but I always make them wait, because I have the power.
That is true, and boy, none of us know what being sexually frustrated like that feels like. That's just completely new. All right, Maggie.
To sort of like echo a little bit, I think, of what everyone's saying, I think that if characters have like casual sex and it's not with the person they're going to end up with, it's not, I have done it, I think, a couple of times in different books, but you have to be careful, because you don't want your readers to be rooting for those characters. You want them to root for the people that the story is based around. So that's kind of a danger. And that kind of goes to what Georgia was saying about, like, level of like hotness in terms of the intimate scenes. But I can't think of any story that I've written where the characters haven't had sex before they've said, I love you. And I think, a lot of the characters I'm writing are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, they date, that's just kind of part of their lives. And even when they're having, like, if I have them have what I'm going to call, I guess, casual sex with who they end up with, it's like they're having sex before they think they have feelings, but I know they do have feelings, and you guys know, because you're reading, that they have feelings, even though they think this is just like, whatever, I'm just going to hook up with this person for the summer, and that's going to be fine, and then it'll be all good. So it's kind of that little trick that you're playing, that even though there's no feelings, there really are feelings. So, right. And they may not have said, I love you to the other person by that point, but that's what you're kind of building towards.
Yes.
One of the things I really love reading when I'm editing is that sort of thing where they're like, oh, I'm just going to sleep with her. I don't even like her, and I can just write in the margin, no one believes you, to the character, not to the author. But that's always one of my favorite moments as a reader. So let us take a question from the Q&A. Have you combined several tropes in one story, and does it make structuring your story more difficult? And also, is there a maximum? And before we answer that, Georgia, it's your pet peeve, I know. What is a trope? So that people aren't like, trope is this, and you're like, that's not a trope.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
A trope, I'm not sure of the correct dictionary definition, but a trope is the basic theme of the romance, and romance has a list of tropes, things like enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, secret baby is a big one in romance, or, as Aurora Ray would say, secret
goat, secret baby goat.
Ice Queen is a trope. What is not a trope is like a scene, like, the love interest is sleeping on the couch and the other person covers her with a blanket. That's a great scene. That's not a trope. A trope is like an overall theme, and it's about who the characters are and how they're going to either do this and then do this. I write a lot of office romance. That's a trope. Boss and secretary, boss and subordinate.
Do you ever combine more than one? And does that make the structuring more difficult?
Honestly, what's interesting is I don't generally, like, I'll say to myself, well, I haven't written enemies to lovers in a while. So I'll write that, and then other tropes will fall into place. Things like an age gap. I don't go into this thinking I'm going to write an age gap romance, but then I put 10 years between my characters and suddenly it's an age gap romance. The book that I have coming out in April called The Secret Poet, that is the Cyrano trope, which is about Cyrano de Bergerac and the person who's helping their friend woo the person that they are actually in love with. That's a trope. Mm-hmm. I don't know. The trope of the story definitely informs the way it goes and the path that you take. It has to. But I don't sit down to write and think about all of the tropes that this book ticks and how am I going to do this. I'm not always cognizant of the tropes. Later on, I'll go back and look at the books that I've written and I'll be like, oh, this trope, this trope, this trope, this trope. But it's not always a conscious decision.
I hear that. Well, Maggie, for your new chip romance, we'll have to make a new, I guess that'll be the restaurant trope. Do you combine several tropes in your books?
I mean, I think I do. I don't know that I ever really thought about it like that, but because I think that the characters sort of come not fully formed in my mind, but I know who they are, or this person likes that person, but this is what gets in the way, not realizing that's actually a trope. And I mean, I can't think of a good example right now, but definitely a lot of, I do a lot of, or at least some, like age gap and office romance, things like that. I do some like police stuff. So there's always tropes in there as well. But I don't think they get in the way of each other unless they would be like two tropes that would be in conflict with each other, like friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, being the same characters. And that's the only way they could really get in the way of each other, because probably in our own lives, there's several tropes that could be like, applied to things in our own lives. It's just, we're many different things, So, so I don't think it really gets in the way unless it's in direct conflict. At least I hope it doesn't.
Well, Nancy, you only have a couple books out. So what tropes have you used already, and how did you combine them?
Well, I typically stick to one trope per novel. At least I try to. Probably that's all I can handle, and it's certainly there's lots of things that can happen along the way. I guess the trope friends to lovers I used a lot, so I consciously kind of playing around with a fourth manuscript, and I consciously selected a different trope. I went with sort of the office romance. Mm-hmm. I would say for the first couple of my novels, and is the trope I realize I used is sort of a veterinarian and client trope, veterinarian client, and they typically bond over an animal that needs help from both of them. Mm-hmm. And it gives an opportunity, because I like animal rescue scenes, and I'm a veterinarian, so I like to put animals in there, and but are also very emotional, right? Because we get very, very emotional about our pets. I've seen that, I felt that myself. So it can, it's a good way to bond. I mean, if someone literally helps save your dog, I mean, how could you not see them in a different light? And maybe that's a bit of wishful thinking on my part, but that's where I tend to go with that.
No, I think that makes sense, and I think it's a take on the whole doctor-patient. And I thought that while you were saying that, but then I realized the patient was the animal, and that's not going to work. But
patients allowed. But,
yeah, no, don't do that. That's not going to fly very well. Joy, what about your tropes?
I don't think I tend to mix them. There might be a little bit of a mix. Mine tend to be more the friends to lovers kind of trope. And in the one that's coming out in February, Carrie and Hope, there might be a little bit of a crossover because Carrie hires Hope as a model for a painting. And so part of her thought process is that she's more or less an employee as well as a friend, so she can't cross that line.
Right.
Workplace romance.
But I don't think I mix them very much. The one that I'm working on now is one where somebody goes back to her hometown, so that would be the trope.
Small town romance.
What is it? Say it again.
Small town romance.
Yes. So yeah.
Are there goats?
I don't think for the most part I mix them. And
You
I
have
don't
any-
consciously think about it ahead of time. I formulate the general idea of the story and the characters, and it just sort of falls into the category it falls into.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's like you've got the idea in your head, and then you might find several tropes that fit really well with that, and you put them together. But I agree. I think I also fly by the seat of my pants, so I don't know what I'm doing until I'm doing it, which sounds really professional. Okay, let's take another question. Somebody says, "Do all books have tropes?" I would say, yeah, they have to. I mean, if I don't think, does everybody agree with that?
I think that you don't necessarily have to say, I'm going to write this trope, but you generally end up fitting into a category. If you're writing,
because there's nothing new under the sun, right? So you always end up having at least one, I would say. Does everybody agree with that? I think so.
Yep, it has to be one.
That's good. Okay. Well then, person, there you go.
I don't think it's always intentional, but there is always one.
I think so too, because I think that's just sort of the lines our mind falls into.
Yep.
Okay, so Maggie talks about this a little bit, and we're going to talk about it a little more. She wants to know, do you have the characters show the "I love you" in other ways than saying it before they actually say it? And I think we talked about, a lot of us do that. And in fact, probably most of us, and it's one of my favorite bits. And then she also wants to know, how long did you usually have the period before when they realize they love before they say that they love them? So should everybody give that a little think for a second there. And also, if you want to throw in there how they know, of course, we are running out of time, so we're just going to have to go for this one pretty quickly there. So if you can make any sense out of all of that shit that I just said. Joy, how long before the realization and the "I love you"?
My characters tend to be attracted to each other in one form or another right from the start. It's usually not romance to begin with. It's usually some sort of friendship that just gets built upon until there is that moment where, they have these feelings, and of course they're fighting them all along. But the attraction for me usually starts at the beginning in some form or another.
Okay, so they're realizing they're attracted to each other, and then it's just that journey of them figuring out it's more than that.
Yeah, it's more than friendship. Yep.
What about you, Maggie?
I think I think the question was how long before they say "I love you" or they know that I love you. I think it varies. I think you can fall in love in one conversation. I think it can take a year sometimes. And I think it just really depends on the characters. I mean, I think if you have your characters fall in love in the first conversation they have, you've got a whole lot of work to do to fill the rest of your word count, and good on you if you can do that. But I think it really does vary along the way in terms of when like kind of Nancy was saying before, sometimes somebody will fall first and the other person falls a bit later. And that's what kind of makes it good and interesting and fun to read.
Yeah, well, that's, again, why it's really nice to write science fiction, because then you can just have a giant spider walk in and then the whole story just hinges on that.
Or that.
Yeah. Nancy, how long before feelings and sayings?
Well, the final "I love you" said verbally to each other, that comes in the last chapter. Feelings build along the way. If there's going to be feelings at the beginning of the book, and again, it depends on the trope you picked. They maybe fall in lust first, but they have the unconsummated kind, and then they work their way down to the "I love yous." And I think you asked, do characters show that they love you in a different way? And and I try to put that in because it's kind of fun. I have a lot of brothers. Which they're not really great at expressing feelings, but they're doing the laundry, they're cutting the lawn, you know, they're surprising you with, you know, my sister-in-law with a gift, or you know, she says, I never have to ask him to do this. He always does this. You know, that's a way of showing that you love someone, that you care, even if you can't find the words. So it's fun. It's fun to work that sort of stuff in there. And one character's like, wow, she is really nice to me. Wonder why. And, you know, everybody else is going, yeah, of course, you know, we know why.
She wants in your pants.
Some people are a little slow to catch on.
All right, how about you, Georgia? Bring us home.
I think it depends on the story and the characters. I don't think there's a necessarily a given length of time or span of time between the two. It's different for every book that I've written. And somebody said, you know, usually one person falls before the other. It's almost never mutual. Usually when one of them starts doing the falling, the other one runs away. And then that's part of the angst, and they have to be won over. And, you know, you've got your girl next door and your brooding loner. And, you know, so I think it depends on the characters. It depends on the story. There is no time limit, but it's always there.
Well, really fast before we say goodbye, what is everyone's newest release so people can find it on the BSB web store? Nancy.
The newest release is Veterinary Technician. It's the second book. It's a series of 3 books set in a veterinary practice that I based in Saskatchewan, where I used to practice, and it's the second book, and it's the Val. She's the veterinary technician, and she finds love, and there we go.
Georgia.
16 Steps to Forever is out right now. I know it's not Christmas anymore, but so is All I Want for Christmas, which is novellas. Go get them, read them, have fun.
And if she held up all the books she has now, she'd fall over under the weight.
True.
Joy.
I had No Regrets that came out in November, and that's the one that deals with the serious illness. And I don't have a copy of it, but let's see if we can get this on there.
Yeah.
Carrie and Hope is coming out in February, and that's one of the Friends to Lovers books.
Awesome. Maggie.
I've got Bulletproof, which came out in November, and then also with Georgia, the novella collection, Georgia and Fiona Riley, that's out just this past December.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, all my lovely panelists. I'm sorry we didn't get to the questions later, but stay tuned. There is more BSB fun on the way and all weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Barbara. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Barbara. Bye, everyone.
See you.